We on or rolling? Hello. Wow, it's been a long time since I've done a camera to face to camera video, so bear with me, it's not the most comfortable experience in the world. But with Christmas coming up, I really felt it was a good opportunity to sit down and share some thoughts and ideas. I think, one of the first things to highlight really is obviously Christmas and New Year's will mean and will represent a lot of different things to everyone. Everyone experiences these things differently, but that's what also makes it a really interesting and fascinating time to document and record with a camera. And actually, almost the more people that do it, the more fascinating it becomes. And so before I go into Christmas, I might try and find a moment. It might even be during a drive somewhere, or grabbing a coffee somewhere. I'll just find a moment to sort of try and identify really things that are going to make this Christmas different from previous Christmases and Christmases to come. And so identifying and honing in on the things that are unique to this moment in time suddenly create subjects and photo opportunities that will become more valuable and more interesting because of the fact that they're unrepeatable. And if you can do that, and if you can identify those and capture them, you're already on the way to just having some fantastic, really interesting photographs as well. And they don't just have to be the happy things that you look on and focus on as well. They can be the more poignant things, because Christmas and New Year's there will inevitably be some more poignant moments and some more somber moments to reflect on. And whilst that may feel painful and you may feel reluctant to explore that with a camera, I think actually over time they become more valuable and more powerful, and you may actually find yourself treasuring them more. People approach these things differently, but if you can sensitively find a way of exploring things that are more challenging at this time of year, I think that can be a really powerful thing to explore if you can. What I'll do now is I'll just sort of go through, because I know everyone's into different types of photography, and I'm into different types of photography as well. And so I'll sort of tackle them, I guess, genre by genre, and share some ideas. If I can share some tips and settings, maybe I will as well. I'll just roll through them. And so, Christmas, I think, and New Year's is definitely about people, isn't it? It's definitely about, whether it's a small group, whether you're on your own, whether you're volunteering, or whether you're in a big party, a big group of friends and family, I guess when I say it's about people, really, we're the only people that are aware that Christmas is happening. Even though we like to pretend the dogs and cats kind of know what Christmas is, I'm not sure they do. But so it's a people-centric thing. So photographing people is for me at least a big part of this season, and I enjoy it. Photographing people isn't the most relaxing experience for me, and so if I want to go and relax, I'll quite often sort of go to one of my haunts or my local patches where I've formed these deep relationships with, and try and photograph new compositions of scenery and wildlife in it. But actually, photographing people is a good thing, and I know I know some people do like it, but I know a lot of people on my walks and stuff don't necessarily enjoy photographing people. But I think it's a good challenge to sort of force yourself to do a bit of people photography this time of year. I think when it comes to people, the key thing that I'm looking for is that kind of real interaction or real expression. So anything to break through that kind of awareness of the camera, if you want. And then that's a very hard thing to do, but certainly if you can get them to a point where they're kind of ignoring the camera, that can be really good as well. One of the, my icebreakers are really awful. In fact, I almost make them so awful that the more awful my jokes are or my attempt at humour is, the easier it is to break down that kind of barrier of the camera between you and that other person, because it's sort of once you sort of tell a bad joke, it just doesn't seem to matter now that there's a camera there, I think. That's my experience anyway. So, just try and find a way of breaking that down. It could just be by talking and sort of just, having a bad attempt at a bad joke, whatever it is, talking about something that excites people, whether it's a football team, an item of food, whatever it is, just get that sort of spark in people's eyes. Talking of spark in people's eyes, I'm a really big fan of using flash with people, because it softens the shadows on their faces, and it also creates this little catch light in people's eyes, which I think is quite a nice thing to have in a portrait. So if you're not familiar with flash, it's a good opportunity to go out and experiment with flash. Lighting is always a big part of any photograph that you take. When you're indoors celebrating Christmas, that's why flashes can be quite good, because sometimes they're a dark room, sometimes it's hard to get the light that you need to get a good photo. If that's the case, move people closer to the window to get some light coming in from the window. Conservatories are always really good for creating nice, light, airy environments, or just take people out for a walk on a Christmas morning, or at whatever day it is over the season. Go for a nice walk and photograph them like that. But a very good opportunity to experiment and explore with flash, that's for sure. When it comes to landscape and scenery over this period, obviously we have loads of Christmas decorations up in villages and towns and cities. That's always a really fun thing to photograph. Actually, one of the things I find really interesting at this time of year is actually going to places that are normally really busy. So, financial districts in cities and busy urban work offices, areas like that, because they're so desolate and abandoned. They can look really, really interesting at this time of year. The places that are so used to having crowds of people in and busyness and the hustle and bustle of everything, just almost looking like ghost town. The flip side of that, obviously, is that your local patches of green spaces that you enjoy quite often, maybe quieter and to yourself, are suddenly inundated with people as they go for walks with friends and family over the Christmas period. And I know that will really great with some people. But again, I'd throw down that sort of gauntlet to them. Anyone familiar with how my passion is photographing locations again and again and again, the same location, and really trying to get under the skin of that landscape and environment. And so if I only photograph a place when it's empty, that's not really getting under the skin of that landscape and that environment, when actually at a certain time of year or certain times of the year it's inundated with people. That's part of the identity of that place, and that needs to be photographed as well. So if you're one of the people, and I know there's quite a lot out there, that really gets frustrated when there's humans in your landscapes, I would challenge you to actually find a way of creating something really interesting and creative of that landscape that's normally empty, with the people in it, because that can be a good challenge in itself, and it captures that moment in time. Walkers with Christmas hats on and all that kind of stuff. When it comes to wildlife, I really enjoy photographing wildlife at this time of year, and so even though I'm talking about people and stuff, I do like to have a little bit of alone time. It's something that's important to me. Quite often I'll get up early over Christmas and head out to a local park or a local green space and just do some wildlife photography, which I find really cathartic, I guess is maybe the word, maybe not, I don't know. But it's something I really enjoy, and so if we say we're having Christmas at my parents' in London, I'll quite often head out to one of the local parks really early. Now, I say really early, but actually this time of year we're looking at around 8:30 kind of sunrise, which is quite good if you don't like getting up early. That said though, at this time of year, people are getting up even later. So even at 8:30 in the morning around Christmas and New Year's time, you'll actually have a fairly quiet encounter of the landscape. And so even if it's just an hour, equally towards the end of the day as well, I might head out and just have a bit of time photographing wildlife. So I'll be heading to local parks. I quite like heading into this time of year areas where wildlife's actually quite used to people. But that said, there's a lot of other things that I find quite interesting. In my parents' garden, photographing things like foxes, you know, maybe it's a nice time to photograph wildlife that you don't normally photograph. Maybe that's an excuse to try and do that. One of the things that I've always missed with moving up to Yorkshire is my fox encounters. You know, foxes were a big part of my childhood and life growing up in London suburbs. They were the soundtrack, you know, really haunting calls, lying awake at night, hearing these haunting calls of the foxes and seeing them on a really regular basis. So I kind of, I always take an opportunity to try and get some, certainly see some foxes and ideally photograph foxes. The other thing that I always like about going back to my parents' area is the parakeets. They're a divisive bird for a lot of people, but again, they're a really big part of my, and a very big soundtrack to my formative years. And parakeets, I've always been really fascinated by them. So they're the sort of birds that I'd photograph as well. The other thing that I find interesting about Christmas and from a wildlife point of view is actually the species that are actually overwintering here that wouldn't in the past. And so quite often we're looking for birds that are unusual and turning up on migratory path. But the birds that are actually hanging around are just as fascinating. So quite often we'll have blackcaps that are overwintering in towns and cities that, as far as I know, never used to do that. There's certainly reports of blackcaps in cities around the country that are staying in people's gardens and seeing out winter. Also, I think I heard one once of some swallows that stayed around Southampton and overwintered in Southampton, which is really, really unusual. So that's really fascinating behaviour, and that's something that could be quite interesting to photograph as well. And so moving on to things like street and travel photography, it's a really great time of year for that because there's so much going on. There's, you know, office parties, pub crawls, there's Santa runs, there's, you know, Christmas festivals and markets. There's so much going on, and a really good opportunity. I think when it comes to street photography and travel photography in general, but especially at Christmas, is probably thinking about juxtapositions, you know, having someone in a Christmas hat next to something that's really un-Christmassy. I'm trying to think of something that's really un-Christmassy now, but like, I don't know, like outside a bank, or that's a really boring answer. But finding that kind of juxtaposition of a person in an environment that sort of creates this contrast could be really good. We had a tractor run go through the village, which was really fun the other day, and that created some cool opportunities as well. But, you know, it's a really fantastic time to do some street photography. I think the thing with street photography is to think about your approach before you go into it, so you're ready to react. So think about those camera settings. I would probably be looking at a minimum of 500th of a second, really. Keep the ISO on auto and use that exposure compensation to quickly adjust as maybe the light might change and the people that you're photographing move into different environments as well. So you want to set yourself up to be able to react really quickly, I think, with street photography. And so hopefully that's enough sprinkling to keep everyone inspired and gives everyone some ideas to go and explore with a camera over the next couple of weeks. And so I hope you found it useful. Again, I'm still getting used to looking at the camera again, and it's not the most natural thing in the world. But that said, I want to do a lot more videos in 2025. If there's something particular you want to see me do, or some answers, any questions or things that you want to shed light on, put them in the comments or send me a message, and I'll definitely think about trying to do something with those as well. So thanks again. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all your support over 2024. It's been really good. It's been an interesting year, and with lots of really cool stuff happening, and I'm really excited about 2025. So I shall see you then.